147 of you already. Um, so want to encourage people first, if you are calling on the phone, the video is a much better experience. You'll get to see our incredible state advisors, and we have a lot of interesting slides for you. So highly encouraged watching on video. It's not too late to invite people. We did a kind of test run of this and people are like, oh my God, this was so great. I have to invite more people. So if you invite, friends and family members, it's not too late. You can just invite them. We have a really great presentation here for you, and you can practice your organizing while you're on the call, inviting people, because it will be, I don't know if it's life-changing, but it'll be a great experience that you're inviting them to. And want to encourage people to use the chat to share, and for Q&A, we have a really lively chat happening. And if you're new to Movement Voter Project, welcome. And we have a website, movement.vote, that you can get way more information from. We are using closed captioning. Down at the bottom of your screen, there's a little CC button. You can click it for closed captioning. We're trying a new service, so hopefully it works. You can give us feedback. And a lot of people say, oh, we're 70 some days out. People, we are not 70 some days out. This is a different kind of election. We are 11 days out right now from the day that ballots start to go out in the states, okay? People are used to like GOTV happening in October. We're in an election where we're trying to get as many people as possible to vote in September. This is happening now. This is the last minute. Okay, so if you haven't moved money, if you haven't done all the things, this is the time to do it right now. And if you're asking, what can I do? What else can I do? One of the things you can do is organize with us. We've had over 200 house parties. We have a whole bunch of incredible donor organizers all over the country, and local teams that you can connect with. And so hit us up. And thank you for everything. Thank you for being here. And thank you all of you who've been with us for years, building Movement Voter Project since the beginning when it was just an idea. Huge thank you and shout out. I see you, Barbara Wilson. And let's go to the next slide. All right. So quick agenda. I'm going to be really quick because I really want you to hear from our team, especially our local organizers in the states. So Alex, let's just click through the next slides really quick. So I want to pass it to our team. Okay, so super quick, the map. A lot of organizations choose these states or those states. We comprehensively go deep and broad at the same time. So all of the key battleground states, presidential tier 1 and tier 2, and ditto with Senate, all of those states were invested in, from really big levels. From some states we've moved already 7 million to, Alaska, we haven't even put on there, but we've moved a couple 100,000 to Alaska. Just we believe in a diverse portfolio. Next slide. This is, if you look at these little red things here, that's how much Trump won by in each of these states. If you look at the big, tall blue bars, these are our voters who did not vote. So a lot of our job is to get our folks to vote. And you can keep moving. And we include young people along with communities of color. And this is just a stunning picture of how this rising generation that is becoming a bigger and bigger part of the electorate is voting in more and more progressive ways. And people who are turning out, young people, especially college students, renters who are moving around a lot, have an especially tough challenge. And so we're really leaning in to support young people, especially to get out the vote. Next slide. So some people who are new to MVP are like, well, how do we know this stuff works in these community groups? And, how do we know that stuff works? Well, it turns out this has been studied extensively over the last 20 years. There's something called the Analyst Institute, which does control group experiments on all kinds of different voter tactics. And the quick and dirty is that all the things that work best are the things that our groups practice and that we fund. And many of these tactics are ones that are being used in the pandemic extensively, and some, including in person, you'll hear about is being used too, in hopefully like very safe ways. Next slide, please. So everyone wants to know, okay, so how do these local community organizations you work with, how are they pivoting in the pandemic, you know, when door knocking isn't the same and college campus get out the vote isn't the same? So there's, I'm just gonna show you the slide for a second. We're really, really impressed and blown away actually by how well and how fast these groups have pivoted in the pandemic. We saw it with the big pandemic election in Wisconsin. We've seen it in election after election. Our groups have figured out how to pivot. Next slide, please. And I shouldn't say our groups, they're their own groups. We're honored to partner with them. And then lastly, you know, the big thing everyone's worried about is, oh my God, the mail, election administration. And the good news is, you know, we have some allies who we've been talking to who do more of the inside nonpartisan game, working with counties on their election administration practices. So I actually called them a week ago, freaking out, because everyone is really, especially freaking out a week ago about what's going on with the mail. Is this going to, you know, mess everything up? And the good news is that there are a lot of people who are on this, who are working with counties to send every voter a ballot, in many cases, postage paid, who are setting up secure drop boxes, who are making sure that their counting machines, that the county boards of elections have the capacity they need to do extensive early voting, and, you know, paying poll workers more to recruit more, you know, healthy poll workers to have enough polling places. So so I call them being like, you know, it's not usually what we do, you know, helping the inside game with election administration, but do you need more help? Do you need more money? And they basically told me, actually, we're pretty good on resourcing all the things that are needed for you know, key counties and states to pull off their election, you know, really well. What's really needed is what you guys do, what they were telling me what we do, which is supporting local grassroots organizations who are going to work with voters and local communities to get out the vote in the most safe and optimized way possible, hand-holding, helping people through the process one by one. So I'm gonna pass it, you know, and I'll just say, like, big picture, we're preparing for both worst case and best case scenarios, right? We have to obviously plan for worst case scenarios. You know, we think that you know, election night, November 3rd, you know, a lot of our ballots are going to come in late, you know, by mail, and Trump is going to declare victory and is going to say all of it's fraud, all the mail is fraud, stop the count. You know, they're going to do all kinds of things. There's a phenomenon academics call blue shift, which is that in states with mail-in voting, a lot of the Democratic votes come in later, are counted later. So there's going to be, we are preparing for the most likely scenario that in the week or two after the election day, there's going to be a hugely contested fight. And we're going to have to fight for every vote then. But more importantly, we got to get the votes in now. So, we're preparing for worst case scenarios. We're also preparing for best case scenarios. We could have a huge wave tsunami, and we want to make sure we take full advantage of getting everyone out to vote in every state so their voices are heard and we win everywhere, everything. And with that, I will pass it to my amazing colleague, Mira Orozco, to talk about the money and introduce our state advisors.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mirna Rosco. I have the privilege of serving as MVP's Director of State and Local Partnerships, working with an amazing group of individuals who are on the ground day in and day out, talking to groups, working with groups, and understanding their needs so that we can best support them through all of our efforts. And with that, I want to go ahead and just draw attention to this awesome slide that looks beautiful, but is also really exciting because thanks to you and all of our supporters, we've been able to hit $50 million raised and moved to our partner organizations on the ground, which is really, really amazing, and is a big shout out to every single one of you who have helped make this possible. And an even bigger shout out that we're now a little over 50 million raised and moved to the field, which is a big accomplishment. I know our partner organizations have put all of those $50 million to use and increasing voter turnout and making sure that our communities are represented at the ballot box. So thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Here's a little bit more information about where that money has gone. We've moved over now 50 million. We've moved money to donor organizing, supporting other organizations that are also organizing donors and folks in their community so that they can contribute, to not only our efforts, but to other efforts that are out there trying to meet the gaps and needs of these organizations. We've moved over $30 million to our big 5 states. Over 10 to some of the other states in our tier 2, which includes some of our Senate seats, and more to national partners and tier 3 states. So this is a breakdown of kind of where that goes, and even a bigger breakdown by state. Both Florida and Wisconsin, we've been able to move over $7 million to support their work, which is amazing. We actually just had some really awesome wins in Florida this week that our state advisors are going to get to talk about a little bit, but we wanted to make sure to share with you, we're tracking by state, by group, where resources are going to, and you'll get access to all of these slides afterwards if you want to see a little bit what our support has looked like for groups on the ground and in any particular state. With that, and with knowing that there's still a long way to go, right? While we hit 50 million, we know that the need is still high in our communities. We're introducing 3 new funds today. The first and foremost is the Senate Fund. We want to make sure that we're able to really dive into the states that are supporting Senate candidates and our chances of really moving the needle there, as well as our Defend the Election Fund. November is not going to be easy, and we know that we had to defend the election as much as possible. And then finally, we know that the work for a lot of our groups starts the day after the election as well. So we're launching the Progressive Decade Fund, which recognizes that the work of our partners is year-round to really build upon the progressive values that we have and shifting our country. So how you can donate, or if you want more information about any of these funds, you can reach out to any of our donor organizers. Feel free to use the chat box where many of them are ready to answer some of your questions. But here are kind of a couple of slides that give more information about how you can support the Senate Fund, as well as the Defend the Election Fund, and finally the Progressive Decade Fund. Folks on our donor organizing team are so happy to reach out and answer any of your questions to really figure out how you can support any of these funds, or if you have any specific questions about what they all do, and so forth. And there's website links in the chat box to each of these. We wanted to make sure to include them in these slides that you will have access to at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I think the biggest and most awesome part of this conversation today is that you get to hear directly from our partners on the ground. So I'm going to pass it over to our state advisor for the state of Arizona, Corina Iribe, who's going to tell us about the work of our partners there and what's to come for Arizona.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Well, it's morning for me, maybe afternoon for some of you all. My name is Corina Iribe. I'm the Arizona State Advisor, and I've been organizing in the state for about 10 years. I started my organizing journey back in 2010, organizing with a local organization called the Arizona Dream Act Coalition, organizing for the Dream Act and also fighting against SB 1070. I then went on to continue to do advocacy work, vote work, and then in the last cycle in 2018, I worked as the Arizona State Field Director for our Democratic gubernatorial candidate. And then now I am here with the Movement Voter Project, and I feel every step of the way in my journey, I've been where I needed to be, and definitely MVP is the place for me in such an important electoral year. So Arizona, the new swing state, the new purple state, right? I'm so proud of us. And I think in order for us to really be able to appreciate this new political moment that we're in, we really have to understand the history and how we were able to get to this moment. And a lot of the trajectory that got us here starts back in 2010, kind of like my story for Arizona, when the SB 1070, the Show Me Your Papers law, was introduced and signed into law here in the state, were the most racist anti-immigrant laws our nation had seen. And at that moment, you know, our community was at a moment of choice, and it was either to choose fear and give in to the tactics of our Republican-led state, or to come back and fight. And that's just what we did. And a lot of the organizing that we see now today, the infrastructure that we've built, started in 2010 by our leaders. And some of those young leaders back then are the leaders that we still see today heading our organizations. So MVP supports over 25 different local partners in the state of Arizona. And over the last 10 years, we've been really able to transform that fear and that hate that was directly targeted into our communities into electoral power. We said, like, no, this isn't going to happen. We are going to turn around and we are going to mobilize our folks. And that's just what we did. We registered hundreds of thousands of voters and have been flexing our electoral power and muscle ever since 2010. And that has been apparent. You know, 1 year after SB 1070 was passed, we recalled the author of the bill. In 2016, we got rid of Joe Arpaio. But not only have we been good at flexing our defense electoral muscle, we're also now showing up on playing offense. And I think in 2018, where we were really able to solidify ourselves as a swing state, we picked up several local legislative seats, bringing us closer than we've ever been to gaining control in both the House and the state Senate. And this was largely to do, again, because of all of the work these partners did. In the last 4 years, since 2016, we have been able to register over 250,000 new American voters. And just as hard that we worked to register these new voters, of course, we turned them out. And that was apparent in 2018, as we saw with those pickups in the state ledge, and also our first Democratic senator in over 30 years. As well as state wins across the state. And now there's definitely a lot of opportunity this year. 2020, like I said, we were 2 seats away in the state house from gaining control and 3 in the state ledge. We have another Senate seat up for grabs, which our teams are working day in and day out to make sure that we gain that second Democratic seat. And also at the local level, we have many city races and county attorney races, which are very important to our teams. So they've done amazing work. We wouldn't be here without them in this moment of 2020, but you all may be asking yourselves, like Billy mentioned, well, those tactics are amazing, but how do you organize during a pandemic? And I can say firsthand, because I've seen this, I went out 2 weeks ago to visit many of our partners to highlight their work in a video, that folks are not letting the pandemic deter them. The spirit that we saw in 2020 or in 2010 is just as alive today in 2020, because we've seen how the pandemic has highlighted some of the disparities in our communities, and these folks are ready to continue the fight. 2 amazing examples that I can point to is Lucha, Arizona, doing amazing voter registration work. You'll see there in one of the pictures, they're doing voter registration drives. This one, which was actually held on the Tohono O'odham Nation, where first-time voters on the reservation were able to come and do this safe registration, or they could do it from their car, and folks would go up and register them without any contact on an iPad. And then we're also seeing these massive texting and call drives where folks are showing up at Poder in Action held one at their office the day before the primary, and they've sent out hundreds and thousands of texts. Folks came to their office, spread out, did some social distancing, and sent all of these text messages to folks to remind them about the election. And then just to note, some folks are asking if people are going to be going out to the field. We do have some partners that are already going back. If not, we'll be going back in the next few weeks to do contactless door knocking. And you see a picture, an example of our vote team pictured up ahead or up in the right corner. So with that being said, one of the biggest strategies that MVP is employing in 2020, aside from supporting the already amazing infrastructure that's been in place for the last 10 years, is supporting new organizing in API communities, Black communities, Native communities, and rural communities. And with that, I'd like to talk about our new emerging partner, one of our new emerging partners, Raise Arizona. They're located in Pinal County between Pima and Maricopa, and they focus on registering and getting out the vote in Pinal, one of the rural counties that has been long overlooked. And we know that in order for us to not only just win in 2020, but win for the next 10 years and really push this progressive decade, we have to continue to invest in rural organizing. So this was Raises Arizona inaugural election. They did their first C4 field program for this primary, and they supported 6 local city council races in Pinal County. 3 of the 6 candidates that they endorsed actually won their seats, and these were all first-time candidates, progressive candidates. So they are stoked and very excited about the work that they've been doing, and so am I. And they were able to work in 3 cities, do GOTV in Maricopa, Hilo, and Coolidge. And they've been able to scale up in such an amazing way. They've employed 25 people this cycle. And I am just so proud of them and excited to continue investing in their work, because their 2 EDs are former candidates, and now they've come to the side of local organizing, and I couldn't be more proud of them. But with that, if you all have any questions, this is what's happening in Arizona. We're ready. We have the willpower, the people power, and with the right investment, I know we're going to bring it home in 2020. Y'all can drop your questions in the chat box, and I will hand it over to Jillian.
Hey y'all, so I'm not Jillian. My name is Layla Ali, and I'm the State Partnerships Associate here at MVP. And I'm filling in for our amazing NC State Advisor, Jillian Johnson. So I really hope I can hit home for y'all today. I'm so excited to talk to y'all about the movement here in North Carolina. It will become very obvious by the end of the presentation that I rep North Carolina super hard. I tell people that when my parents and I immigrated from Egypt, we first landed in New York, where many Egyptians decide to go. But then I guess my parents opened up a map and chose North Carolina as their home, which I'm super grateful for. I've lived and organized in North Carolina for the last 8 years, starting as a student organizer at North Carolina State University, while our communities across the state were battling one of the most oppressive voter ID laws in the country back in 2013. I worked in the youth and student movement, the racial justice movement, and immigrant justice movement, working with a number of groups, many of whom are now MVP partners. In 2016, me and 3 of my sisters in the movement decided to co-found an organization called Muslim Women For, a Muslim women founded and led grassroots organization in North Carolina that started as a storytelling space and now works to center and advocate for Black, Brown, immigrant, and Indigenous Muslim women. When we first started, we were paying out of pocket. And 4 years later, With the help of MVP and other supporters, we now have 1 full-time staff member and 2 who are working part-time. I witnessed the powerful work of MVP, helping us dream bigger and making sure our work lives for years to come. So let's talk a little bit about the lay of the land in North Carolina. In 2008, we all cheered when North Carolina's 15 electoral votes went to Barack Obama, the first time we'd voted for a Democrat since Jimmy Carter in 1976. But then in 2010, we experienced a terrifying right-wing takeover of the North Carolina General Assembly that established a veto-proof Republican supermajority in our legislature. They immediately got to work dismantling public education, reproductive rights and access, unemployment insurance, Medicare, local Democratic control, and of course, voting rights. The very next year, they gerrymandered our districts to such an extent that we lost 4 of our US House seats, going from 7 Democrats and 6 Republicans in the US House in 2010 to 3 Democrats and 10 Republicans in 2014. They also passed an omnibus voter suppression law, the one I was talking to you about before, that a court ruling found later targeted Black voters with surgical precision and making up things that were never really issues to begin with. So as a result of this right-wing surge, for the last decade, we've essentially been governed by an illegally constituted state legislature in illegal districts, and we've been fighting back in courts and in the streets. So we struggled a lot, like you can see, but as a result, our organizing efforts here in the state are really strong. We have 29 state partners, and all of the movement groups and networks in North Carolina have been honed by the fight back against these attacks on our public institutions and have worked hard to win back some of the progress that's been eroded over the last 10 years, and to prevent some of the worst attempted abuses since we took back the governor's mansion in 2016. We've also developed a deep understanding of how important this election is, that our state cannot survive another 10 years of white ring rule, and we've learned how important elections are more generally, particularly down ballot elections, to our people's lives and to our collective future, the better world we are building for our people. So we're ready, our groups are ready, and we only need 6 seats in the North Carolina House and 5 in the North Carolina Senate to take back control. Our groups are pivoting to COVID-safe voter engagement by making sure that people who want to vote in person feel safe doing so, and that people who want to vote by mail have that access as well. One of our partners, a statewide Black-led C4, is sending PPE voter kits to Black voters around the state with face masks, hand sanitizers, and info about where to vote early. And this brings me to highlight a group called the Carolina Federation. Next slide, please. This is an organization that is really holding it down across our state. The Carolina Federation was founded in 2018 as a network of independent political organizations across the state, organizing across race and rural-urban divide to build a state that works for all of us. The project initially grew out of a local group in Durham called Durham for All, which was created in order to mobilize people of color and working class residents to engage in both elections and issue work. 2 of the co-founders of Durham for All created Carolina Federation to expand this work across the state with like-minded and strategically aligned partner groups. And to just share a little bit of how it works in North Carolina, it's a state where we have a number of blue cities surrounded by lots of red counties. And the more that, and more we're realizing that we have to be engaging and mobilizing with people in rural communities, as well as in cities, in order to really take back our state. They've already seeded 3 new chapters in 3 different counties: Guilford for All, New Hanover for All, and Forsyth Freedom Foundation, and are partnering with local groups in all 4 counties to do voter mobilization and issue engagement work. So I'm super excited about their program, and I know it's going to show real results. And I've been talking to Jillian, and they're doing amazing, amazing work. So I just wanted to thank you all so much again for being here with us, and I'm happy to answer any questions as much as I can. You can drop them in the chat or email them to me, and I'm sure I can send them to Jillian. And I really believe in the state and the infrastructure that our groups have spent creating to build power for our communities. So now I'll just pass the mic to my colleague Eric, our Florida State Advisor, to talk to you more about the fabulous work that they're doing down there.
Okay. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Hi, everyone. Happy to be on this call with everyone today, and thank you so much for everything you're doing to support great work like you've heard about and hope to hear, we'll tell you about in Florida. My name is Eric Bracken. He, him. I've been doing movement work for close to 25 years. Most of that was in the labor movement with SCIU. organizing, started out organizing janitors for a number of years and other low-wage service sector workers, and increasingly went into political and community organizing work. And over the last several years, have spent a lot of time with a variety of organizations in the movement in Florida, really trying to build kind of greater alignment and connectivity for us to think about how we break down our silos to be able to accomplish bigger things. We just had a primary here this week on Tuesday, and you know, so much exciting work happening around that primary. Also, a ton of things that we learned with all of our partners here in Florida. This was the first election for many people who have recently been able to restore their right to vote because of the work that MVP really supported back in 2018 to pass Amendment 4. And so returning citizens like Desmond Meade, who leads the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition and led the Amendment 4 fight, were able to vote for the first time. And if, you know, I would, he just, you know, there's a powerful video if you can find FRC's Facebook page, and there's a little video of Desmond right after he left the voting booth, which made me cry the other night. I'm not a crier. It made me cry seeing that. You know,
like, let's just keep getting delayed.
Yeah, I would just recommend that to anyone. FRC and many other organizations, around 10 groups, created a coalition to focus around prosecutors and sheriff's races, to move out into communities that, you know, have been their lives devastated by Florida's mass incarceration, to, you know, put out a new vision of justice and to say that we can actually use our new power to reclaim the system and to elect prosecutors who are going to vote not to, you know, not to require, you know, not to take money bail anymore, or who are going to, you know, try to undo the school to prison pipeline and really lead with a kind of an abolitionist vision of what a justice system can look like in Florida. And so there was just some amazing victories the other night. So up here, I'm in Orlando today. You know, Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, Let Your Voices Be Heard. They were putting out, you know, 100 people over the last 10 days per day. We're out knocking on doors and returning, you know, kind of returning citizen heavy communities, communicating about a woman named Monique Worrell. Monique was running for state attorney. Polls from 2 months ago showed that she was 28 points down, but she was running against 3 other candidates in the Democratic primary, all of whom had essentially, you know, kind of a lock 'em up vision of justice. And Monique was kind of in a senior position with the Reform Alliance, founded by hip hop artist Meek Mill, who, you know, many of you may have heard about from his, you know, being locked up for many years unjustly. And because of the work of all these returning citizens and people getting out the vote, you know, Monique ended up coming way back because of those GOTV efforts. She won the vote on election day 3-1 over her next closest challenger, and she went from 28 points down to winning by 11. So it's just a really huge, huge victory for FRC, for returning citizens everywhere in the state, to demonstrate what this new kind of voting power can be. And, you know, this was a 150-year-old Jim Crow law that was undone in 2018. Many of you probably have read about kind of the ongoing court case. The Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, just ratified essentially the legislature's law last year that put in a new poll tax or a fines and fees requirement for returning citizens to be able to register to vote. Recently, to try to deal with that, FRC has put up a fines and fees fund. It's actually trying to pay off people's fines and fees obligations and then going back out and registering them to vote. LeBron James and Michael Jordan each has contributed to this fund. So people are very persistent here. There have been obstacles put in the way of everyday people to try to have an inclusive democracy for hundreds of years in Florida. But you know, in front of every obstacle, people here on the ground are really committed to trying to overcome it. Another huge coalition that just led a huge effort for primary day and is going to continue that effort into the general election is a coming together of 8 different organizations in Florida under a banner of what we call Florida for All. That is leading, have spent years and years trying to build trust to increasingly think about, again, how do we break down silos in order to be able to run bigger and badder program together. So the Florida for All Coalition, which includes New Florida Majority and Dream Defenders and Florida Immigrant Coalition, Faith in Florida and Organized Florida, SCIU, Planned Parenthood, Jobs of Justice, is running the biggest voter contact program in Florida in 19 different counties, 3 million different voters. They're actually, I heard today, thinking about expanding that universe even further for the general election. And for the primary, made over 4 million phone and texting attempts, had 87,000 phone conversations, sent mail to 800,000 different homes, had digital ads to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, had 24,000 supporters take action doing volunteer work and other types of action, and set up a robust election protection infrastructure that was tested during the primary to fine tune for the general. Over 12 organizations across the state coming together to push SOEs, to put out drop-off boxes for vote by mail, to train poll workers and poll monitors, and to just have a regular communication system through the day to be able to react to problems and communicate with supervisors of elections to deal with those and really try to make sure that everyone's vote is counted. The same coalition has been coordinating constituency communications and organizing programs with women, with faith, with youth, with Black and Latinx voters. And we need to do this in a very kind of refined way. Florida is particularly the Latino community, a very diverse state. Everyone knows that Cuban voters are a little bit more conservative in the state and are different in their kind of outlook and certainly history than Puerto Rican voters and Venezuelan voters and Colombian voters and Nicaraguan voters, Honduran voters, up and down the line. And so in order to really maximize both support for, ultimately our presidential candidate and turnout, each of those communities needs very specific approaches. And so this coalition has been convening with many other organizations in the state to make sure that we have very refined and targeted organizing, GOTV and communications programs targeted at each of those communities. In a state where it matters, Florida, we always win by the margins. When President Obama won the state 2 cycles in a row, he won, by a point in 2012. Donald Trump won by a point in 2013. That's out of close to 10 million voters this year. And so it is important that we don't overlook any community. And that takes me to the next slide with, one of the partners that MVP has helped to really get off the ground and scale up their program this year. The Family Action Network movement actually comes out of the refugees work in the 1980s when many Haitian refugees came to Miami. Has been doing social services and community organizing around issues like housing and immigration in South Florida for a long time. A lot of people kind of point all Black voters in Florida with a broad brush, but we have a very significant Caribbean diaspora here, 528,000 Haitians in Florida, 336,000 Jamaicans. It's not a bad thing that we have we just nominated a vice presidential candidate this year with Jamaican ancestry, and so that has really excited the community. But back in 2016, there was a lot of resistance in the Haitian community to Hillary Clinton because of the Clinton Foundation's history in Haiti. And it was something, Trump actually did an event with Haitian voters in Little Haiti. And there was a lot of kind of depressed turnout, a lot of, people who wanted to vote against the Clintons back in 2016. And again, in a state that's won by a coin flip, those things matter. So the Family Action Network movement is started at C4 this year. MVP has helped them to be able to stand up a voter registration program. They've actually been out door knocking in the last couple of months because, a community that is poor and not always connected to, cell phones and internet and everything else that we're trying to do by organizing virtually. And so, but BOM is also, also trying to lead up a texting and phone banking program to the entire Haitian community in South Florida and up in Orlando as well. So they've registered over 7,000 voters in the last few months. They've been knocking on 6,000 doors a day. And this is just one of many, many organizations here who are doing those things. I will say this, just to wrap up. You know, I heard Billy say at the beginning that, you know, we are very much expecting in this country, because of the rise of vote by mail, to, you know, potentially have a very long kind of vote counting process that Donald Trump has already signaled that he will, you know, use that moment to try to delegitimize the election. Well, in Florida, for, you know, it's not the best thing for, it is a voter suppression thing, but it is also the reality in Florida that vote by mail, in many states, you have to have it postmarked by election day for it to count. In Florida, those vote by mail ballots have to be into the supervisor of elections office on election day, which means that our vote count actually happens pretty quickly. When you look at the vote count, how it happened the other night, there were some national people on Twitter commenting about this. All the vote by mail gets reported first. So like, it's, you know, vote by mail counts were counted in every county by like 15 minutes after the polls ended. What that means is that if we are able to win Florida, and we do our jobs, there really is no path for President Trump to win re-election. The entire conservative movement knows this. That's why they've invested in this state so much. If we do our job in Florida and we can win Florida, you may know by the 11 o'clock news at night who the next president is going to be. And so that is what we're doing. That's what we're focused on. If we turn Florida not just around in this election, but we start to working by, you know, registering returning citizens, mobilizing our communities, getting people involved over the next several years, taking this from a purple state in direction of Virginia, in direction of Colorado, in direction of Nevada that have increasingly become bluer and bluer, the whole electoral map of this country changes. There is not a path for Donald Trump to win election again, or anyone like him. So that's what we're committed to do, and thankful to all of you who give support to allow us to happen. And with that, I want to pass it to Jamila up in Michigan.
Hi all, sorry about that, it took me a second to unmute. My name is Jamila Martin, I'm the Michigan State Advisor. Before, I guess until September of last year, I was actually the co-director of an education organizing network here in Detroit, where I'm based, that MVP helped to voterize, as we call, with a grant in 2018. So as many of you on this call probably know and remember, we lost Michigan in 2016 by only 10,000 votes. If you've been watching the Democratic National Convention, you probably saw Michelle Obama refer to a state that lost by 2 votes per precinct. That was us. So that galvanized a type of progressive energy in 2018 that we really had not seen in years in this state, and that really set us up to be successful, hopefully here in 2020. Many of the groups that we fund, along with their allies around the state, were pivotal in 2018 in passing a massive democracy expansion ballot initiative that gave us automatic voter registration, gave us same-day registration, and it gave us no reason absentee voting, or the ability for everybody essentially to vote from home, to vote by mail. And we also elected a supportive Secretary of State in Jocelyn Benson, who has really been a hero during this pandemic. She sent out applications for absentee ballots to every single registered voter in the state for all of the elections that have happened since the pandemic broke out. So, you know, what's at stake this year in Michigan? This is something you all probably know. You can see it here on the slide. In addition to being a key state for the presidential race, we also have a Senate seat that we're working to protect. There are key congressional seats that we're also trying to protect and potentially pick up, as well as seats down ballot. How is it going so far? So I will say post-primary, somewhat kind of similar to Eric, I am feeling cautiously excited. So there were 2.5 million votes cast. That's the highest primary turnout ever in Michigan, and the highest primary turnout ever by quite a bit. So in 2018, that was our previous high. That was 2.2 million votes, and that was during 2 highly contested elections on both the Republican and Democratic side for governor candidates. 2 weeks ago when we had our primary, there really were not too many contested elections, as you know, kind of all things considered, and yet the turnout was incredible. Almost 1.6 million of those ballots were cast absentee, and with a significant kind of overrepresentation of progressive voters. Votes were also counted by the next day. So, you know, all of that is good, decent news for us. Again, cautiously good. Next slide. But it did not happen by accident. So all 32 of our grantees had to work extremely hard to pivot during the pandemic. And we worked really hard to support them with the resources that you all have sent through us. So, you know, one extremely new group that we have brought online into electoral work that was really stymied by the pandemic is a group called Motor City Freedom Riders. This is a C3 501c3 organization that has been organizing in Detroit and the Tri-County area around Detroit for a couple of years, galvanizing public transit riders to advocate for increased or better transit services. And they've done a really great job. But you know, they could not, during pandemic, they can't go onto buses, and they didn't want to be out at bus stops talking to folks. And so they were really not sure how to continue to build their list and to grow the number of folks that they were talking to. We were able to help them with something, you know, pretty simple, just helping them get some QR codes. You've probably seen, well, I don't know if you've seen them, but anyways, it's a way for folks to use their phones to like text in automatically, and some chat bots so that bus riders could enroll in their organizing. And with that like relatively simple tech tool, they were able to start engaging 30 to 60 new bus riders every week, and to bringing them into their electoral plans. But if you want to move to the next slide, I think the example that really shows the potential of MVP and our funding is a collaboration across 3 groups that we've been supporting. And so that's the Restaurant Opportunity Center of Michigan, the Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation, and the Hispanic Center of West Michigan. And so, you know, in Michigan, honestly, the Latinx vote is often really ignored. I was on a call just last week where a pollster was asked about Latinx voters, and the answer that they gave was, you know, well, our guess is that they basically respond and are thinking the same way that Black voters are thinking, but since they're a smaller number, we just didn't poll them, we didn't focus on that. So, which I, you know, to be honest, didn't get the amount of shock that it deserved in that meeting. But MVP understands a couple things. 1, we know that we cannot afford to leave any voters behind. And 2, we know that if we want real change, organizing has to be led by the most impacted communities. They really cannot be an afterthought. And so what we were able to do is to bring together one of our most experienced partners in Rock, Michigan, with groups who haven't done voter engagement in the past, but really do have the potential, and who we went out and recruited to engage in electoral work. And now those groups are working together in a mentoring and training relationship and running a shared, really transformative statewide engagement plan in Latinx communities across Michigan. So, you know, there's still a lot of work to do, and I will say it is absolutely not all sunshiny. There were about 10,000 ballots that were turned away in our August primary. That is the same number that we lost by in 2016. So if we are not, you know, if we don't give everything that we have and like leave it all on the field, as they say, you know, we could lose this thing again. But we really, I think that we have the opportunity to double down and to win by a landslide, which I think we all know is what we need. So with that, I'm going to pass it to our Midwestern neighbor, Wisconsin, and the state advisor there, Rima.
Hey everyone, can folks hear me? Good. Hi again, my name is Rima Ahmed, and I am the Wisconsin State Advisor. And I come to you all from beautiful, sunny Milwaukee, where I was born and raised. And I've been organizing out here across interfaith and immigrant communities for over 10 years. And I know there's supposed to be some rivalry between Wisconsin and Minnesota, but my North Star in this work comes from the late former Minnesota Senator Paul Wellstone and his motto, "We all do better when we all do better." And that's exactly the spirit that's informing MVP's work all across Wisconsin. So some quick background on Wisconsin. Folks may know this. In 2016, for the first time in my lifetime, a Republican president won the state, and Trump won by just under 23,000 votes. That was less than 1%. So when we talk about close elections, I don't know how much closer you can get than 0.77%. And while this was jarring, it highlighted the years of systemic divesting and undermining of unions, environmental regulations, voting rights. I know some of my other colleagues talked about the way that state legislatures did this in their states. So the Wisconsin that we see today is one of the most gerrymandered states in the country. And again, this is thanks in all parts to the Republican takeover of both the governorship and the state legislature in 2010, right as we were going into redistricting in 2011. I was gonna say 2021. That's not it, 2011. So with all this in mind, the work in Wisconsin today is about putting the pieces in place for a progressive decade, starting with this November, because we definitely don't want a repeat of this last decade. So the strategy of our more than 40 grassroots partners, with which, yes, we are working with over 40 groups across the state, is threefold: to defend democracy, protect the veto, vote and win. Defend democracy, this is where we're talking about election administration, organizing municipalities to expand voting options, and institute safe measures so every Wisconsin citizen can vote. Protecting the veto is about, again, how gerrymandered our state is. And so we need to make sure that we can protect the veto of our governor, help our voters come out not only to vote at the top of the ticket, but all the way down to, so we can protect important state legislative districts. And voting and winning, speaking of voting, less than a month from this week, voters in Wisconsin are going to start casting their absentee ballots. You heard me right. Starting about September 18th, folks will be able to start voting. So we will effectively have 46 election days in Wisconsin this year. And the good news is, because if that's a little scary to you, that we're having GOTV for 46 days, the good news is that our partners are ready. We have held 3 elections during the pandemic this year, and we had one huge win in electing progressive judge Jill Karofsky to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. So our partners have been pivoting, and they've been pivoting from preparedness. This means taking plans that they have been building for over a year to turn canvassers into phone bankers and texters, learning innovative outreach strategies so that they can pull supporters from social media platforms like Facebook into volunteering to mobilize their friends and families. And we've been investing in trusted messengers, the people we are already looking to for help and support during this pandemic. People like our family, our friends, our neighbors, our coworkers. It is trusted messengers that will help able to cut through the noise of this election cycle to inspire and mobilize our communities to show up and vote this year. So I want to actually take a second and highlight one of these groups, one of our 40+ groups that we're working with. And that group is Pierce County Grassroots Organizing, or PC GROW. Folks who may not be familiar, Pierce County is on the western part of the state. It is right across the river from the Twin Cities, and in 2016 became one of those infamous pivot counties, basically the counties that voted for Obama in 2008 and 2012, and then voted for Trump in big numbers in 2016. Now, PC GROW is a group that MVP incubated. It was starting with 3 volunteers, and we also moved them their first grant through our capacity building program, which you'll be able to hear about a little later. We were able to connect them with the Land Stewardship Project and the Wisconsin Farmers Union, 2 groups that in a similar vein to what Jamila was talking about, have been around for a long time and could help this newer group to voterize and learn a little bit more about the landscape in the state. And then we've also plugged PC GROW in with other groups all across the Wisconsin organizing infrastructure and ecosystem so that their impact can be amplified and multiplied. And I'm really excited to say that in January, PC GROW hired their first organizer, and despite the pandemic election of 2020, saw huge wins. We talked already about how progressive judge Jill Karofsky won, and in that county, in Pierce County, she won by 54%. And again, this is the same county that Trump won in 2016 by 53.4%. So I'm hoping that's a really good indication of where we're going in November. You see some pictures here of them and their work. So you've got Juliet and Christian, 2 of the the active volunteers with PC Grow casting their absentee ballots. PC Grow also was part of putting together a leadership development training with another Wisconsin partner called Wild, where they applied deep canvassing tactics to calling on phones. So basically, some of the same tactics that we were seeing were working very well at the doors, but during a pandemic, we can't hit those doors. They were trying out on the phones and found was successful. And again, this is just one of many partners that we are supporting to do hyper-local grassroots organizing all across the state. We are organizing more people in more places so we can win in November and beyond. So I'm happy to answer any more questions in the chat box and talk more about my great state. But with that, I want to turn this over to my amazing colleague, Katie Sipp, to talk about MVP's critical work in Pennsylvania.
Great, thanks so much, Rima, and thanks to all of you for being on today. My name is Katie Sipp, and I'm the Pennsylvania State Advisor for MVP. And I realized recently that in January of 2021, as we're hopefully inaugurating a new president, I will reach my 30th year anniversary of knocking on my first door for a political organization. I've been doing movement work in Pennsylvania for about 20 years in a bunch of different capacities, mostly in the labor movement and in the migrant rights movement, but have been the executive vice president and political director of the biggest SEIU local in the state, and also went on to found the Working Families Party chapter in Pennsylvania. I feel like people are sort of starting to take Pennsylvania for granted this year, and that's kind of buoyed by the fact that today the Heritage Foundation's C4 arm released a poll of a number of different states, including some of my colleagues on this list, and Pennsylvania was the only one where they actually saw Biden leading Trump. In all of the other states, they're still saying Trump is leading Biden, but they feel like Biden is winning Pennsylvania at this point. But as we saw, it's still a state that's very much in play on both the Democratic and Republican side. President Obama was here last night in Philadelphia, that was the location of his speech at the DNC. And today, President Trump is giving a speech outside of Scranton to, sort of try to detract from Biden's acceptance speech at the DNC. So he's giving a speech in the town called Old Forge. Obviously, Clinton barely lost Pennsylvania in 2016 by around 1%. The margin was around 44,000 votes. We have, could you go to the next slide, Alex? We have two pretty exciting congressional races this year, one in CD1, in addition to the presidential work, one in CD1 where perennial Democratic target Brian Fitzpatrick, who's been described as the most bipartisan Republican in the US House, is running against a Democrat named Christina Finello. And then in the central part of the state in CD10, the current incumbent is a Republican named Scott Perry, who's very closely aligned with the president. He is being challenged this year by Eugene DePasquale, who is currently the state auditor general. So he's won statewide election twice and was a very popular state house member from before he ran for the auditor general seat. Some of the partners that are doing work in the district, that sort of their work is nested in CD10, if you're interested specifically in supporting them, are CASA in Action and PA Stands Up. And I said in the chat that I would talk a little bit about some, sort of innovative work that Pennsylvania partners are doing. So we had our primary on June 2nd. It had been pushed back 5 weeks due to the pandemic. And obviously June 2nd also occurred in the middle of a national uprising around where, Black and brown communities rising up around police violence. And the Pennsylvania primary consequently was really impacted by that pandemic. For the first time, many Pennsylvania voters were allowed to vote by mail due to some election law changes that happened at the end of 2019 and were signed into law by Governor Wolf, including both an expansion of the time that voters can register to vote up to an election, and then also the expansion of a broad right to vote by mail regardless of the reason that you needed to vote by mail. Previously, we had very restrictive absentee ballot rules in PA. So what we saw was almost 2 million people apply to vote by mail in the June 2nd primary. At that point, a lot of the state was still very locked down as well, and people were not kind of going out. And so we saw in some of the locations where People had to go to drop off ballots if their ballot got mailed to them too late and they couldn't mail it back in time for the deadline. You know, in Black neighborhoods in both Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, there were armed like cops wearing like SWAT outfits outside of ballot drop-off locations. And obviously that's a pretty chilly thing to have happen, especially at a moment when many people in the community are, you know, fearing the action of the police. So one thing that our groups did was 3 of our groups that are affiliated with the Center for Popular Democracy, Make the Road PA, CASA in Action, and One Pennsylvania, launched a survey via a geofenced ad. So I know, you know, as I said, I've been doing this work for 30 years. I was like, what's a geofenced ad? What does that even mean? It's essentially an ad that targets cell phones or internet provider locations for computers around a particular area. So they targeted with a geofenced ad, these like polling places and ballot drop-off points in various places around the state that were populated by Black and brown voters, and then sent them a survey to follow up that said, hey, how was your experience voting in person this year? Did you know that you can now vote by mail in the election? And it included a link to the state's vote by mail application. So that is one example of a new tactic that groups in Pennsylvania are using in terms of like, how are they organizing in response to COVID? Next slide. I wanted to spend a little bit more time talking about one of our other partners, which is a group called One Hood Power. So One Hood Power was the C4 organization that was the sister organization of a 501c3 called One Hood Media that was founded in 2006 in Pittsburgh by a rapper named Jasiri X. And One Hood Media was really designed to, I mean, they were founded to do organizing around cultural organizing and direct action, particularly with African-American youth in the western part of the state. Pennsylvania has changed a lot since James Carville in the 1986 election described the state as, you know, Alabama with Pittsburgh on one end and Philadelphia on the other. We have seen an explosion of people of color moving into what had been historically considered to be the white areas of the state. And so One Hood decided after, you know, the killing of an African-American youth in Pittsburgh, Antoine Rose, and that the subsequent inadequate prosecution of that person, or of the cop that murdered Antoine, by the district attorney in Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh, who is a guy who actually ran as both a Republican and a Democrat, because you can do that in Pennsylvania, that they needed to get into electoral activity. And so this year, we gave them a lot of capacity to support to form their own 501c4, including helping them find a lawyer that, you know, gave them the ability to fill out all of the paperwork that you need to like start a new organization, write bylaws, recruit a board, all of those kinds of things. Since the pandemic hit, when the pandemic hit, I should say, you know, they kind of pivoted their work to really focus on the impact of COVID on Black Pittsburgh. And they've been doing weekly Zoom briefings called What is COVID, you know, sort of about what is COVID's impact on the Black community in Pittsburgh ever since then, as well as combining it with vote information. In most cases, it's nonpartisan vote information, just giving people information. But they've had, you know, sort of dozens of, at this point, of briefings featuring Black doctors, policymakers, city council people, mayors, et cetera, talking about the particular impact of COVID on Black folks, and they are getting a, you know, a wide audience. So for this year, what they decided was, you know, they were going to expand their reach outside of Pittsburgh into 9 counties in Western Pennsylvania, and they are particularly focused on improving turnout in about 260 precincts, sorry, I had to look at the number, 260 precincts in those 9 counties where the African-American population is 40% or greater, and their particular target is, again, African-American youth. So again, really thanks everybody for joining us today. Appreciate it. Happy to answer questions in the chat. And now I'm gonna pass it back to Billy.
Thank you. Oh my God. Can we just give like a standing, I know we can't all hear each other, but can we give a standing ovation for all the local partners and all the local and all the state advisors? Like, you know, I feel like the organization has 3 hearts. There's the state advisors, there's the central team working behind the scenes doing all the operations and everything, and then there's you all, right? And so this just makes me so happy because I feel like we're connecting at least two of the hearts of this work on this call. And so the slide in front of you is just a quick summary. I'm going to keep it moving. We're a little behind. And I want to introduce, people think of MVP as a place that advises donors and moves money to groups, right? And there's a behind the scenes part of MVP that almost nobody outside of MVP and the groups knows about, which is our incredible capacity building program. And so I'm going to introduce Andrea, who works on does a lot of things, including partnerships, and is also going to talk about our capacity building program. Andrea Catone.
Thank you so much, Billy. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to share more about our capacity building and partnerships work at MVP with all of you. Our capacity building program allows us to help groups address the changing and challenging landscape that Billy and our state advisors described, as well as be equipped to carry out their plans. While the grants we move groups help cover operations and staffing, our capacity building program covers requests that come into us from groups that are looking for tools or data, resources, and trainings, things like Vote by Mail and Ballot Ready that have been talked about so far, as well as the funds to cover those things. We're grateful to be a member of the Movement Cooperative, also known as TMC, a co-op of more than 36 progressive organizations who have banded together in order to access economy of scale rates for tools and data, helping us make the dollars that we get stretch further impact-wise. But we just don't help groups get these tools, trainings, and resources. We also make sure that what we're offering is actually what's needed. We provide vetting of tools and resources that we recommend, as well as connected human support. And that connected human support is something that's especially important during times that we're in. I'm going to share a few examples about how our capacity building work that illustrate the breadth of the support that we offer. One example is when we worked with Durham for All in North Carolina and helped them access tools like Hustle and ThruTalk. And we also talked through whether or not the tools were the right fit, down to working through the details of the organizer math it takes to get there, to make sure that the tools were exactly what they needed, rather than pushing on them something that we may have thought before talking them might have fit. Another example is our work with Mgage in Florida, who had already had an amazing field plan, and they wanted to deepen the bench of Muslim leaders in the community. They wanted to build a leadership development recruitment program into their existing campaign, and we were able to connect them with a Muslim coach that had the background to offer tailored support for exactly what they needed. On the next slide, you'll see some stats about the work the capacity building program has done in 2020. We stepped up our support as the pandemic hit in these very first days. We provided dozens of rapid response grants to more than a dozen groups to make sure they had exactly what they needed from hardware and beyond to continue communicating and do the work moving forward from day one. We're also getting in requests from groups now to help prepare for a long election season, a potentially contested election, and more. We're helping them with things like strategic planning, facilitation, and deeper infrastructure support. On this next slide, you'll see some testimonials from groups that share more about the human connected support and how we meet people where they are. And I have to say that these two things are something that I'm incredibly proud of when it comes to our capacity building program. Groups and organizers let us know that it's refreshing to know that working with us is about their needs and being responsive to them instead of making them jump through hoops. They've shared with us that they appreciate how we take the time to make sure that everything we connect people with is the right fit for them, and that we don't ask them to do things they don't want to do, and that we make the plan with them, and a plan that's sustainable and helps them looking forward and thinking in the long term. We're in an intense time. I think that's even an understatement. And no matter what happens, it's going to continue to be intense. And groups know that. They know that there's no break in sight, and they know that we're here for them, and they trust us. And we need your help getting these resources to groups. Funds donated to capacity building go directly to requests that come in for groups. And these are groups that we're also covering grants for operations to keep the lights on and to keep their staff employed. I'm going to pivot a little bit right now to partnerships, which is the work that also fuels the capacity building work as we build relationships with tech and service providers as well as fellow capacity builders. At MVP, we know that you've heard from our state advisors, there's amazing work being done on the ground, but there's still a lot left to do and left to raise. And we know we can't do it alone. We believe in partnership, collaboration, relationships, and ecosystem health. Some of the types of groups and organizations we partner with are local and national donor networks and communities, fellow funders and capacity builders, influencers, capacity building practitioners and service providers, as well as national organizing and movement networks. And we work with these partners to help move more money to groups by using the amazing research our state advising team does to power funds and portfolios for partners to move money to groups that we recommend. We also procure tailored services and resources for group, like I talked about in the last section. We spread the word about MVP, including with influencer partners, which I'll get to in a moment. We gather research that helps us raise more money for grantees. We foster healthy and collaborative ecosystems, which exponentially increase the impact of resources by providing increased coordination, innovation, effectiveness, and efficiency. And I want to take a moment right now to thank our partners. Many of you are on the call right now. Those of you that we've worked with to help build funds and portfolios to raise money for groups, I want to take a moment to thank you wholeheartedly. From Airlift, Force Multiplier, Flip the Vote, to Feed by Tweet, Blueprint, which is a new platform for donors created by Swing Left, the Together Fund, Dine for Democracy, and more, partners have moved more than $9 million to groups. Thank you so much, and I hope you all join me in thanking them. And if you know of an organization that can benefit from the services that we offer in partnership with us, please connect us by emailing me at andrea@movement.vote. On the next slide, you'll see more about the exciting work that we're doing with influencers and expanding, which shares the goals of our partnership work to raise more money for groups, amplifying our digital presence and funds, as well as validating us to a wider network of donors. Check out our most recent email that Billy sent out to see the Martin Sheen video, learn more about the Feed by Tweet, and keep an eye out for more about a new partnership with March on ballot boxes. And you can visit movement.vote/events for information about some upcoming events we have with partners. Last, I want to lift up some of the behind the scenes ecosystem and community building work that's especially critical in these times when coordination, communication, and trust is needed as we navigate unfolding, ongoing, and interconnected crises and challenges. MVP has helped build and foster and facilitate a national networks community at the Movement Cooperative, which brings together national networks like People's Action, CPD, Alliance for Youth Action, Faith in Action, Community Change, NextGen, and more, to work together as we serve state and local affiliates with the assistance of TMC. Also, we've helped to build the Learning to Win community, which bridges more than 60 organizations, which is a place where we build trust, relationships, community, and hone our organizing craft together and cross-fertilize ideas and dream and build together. And it's my pleasure to introduce Jason next, who is going to take you through looking to the future and how you can help us. Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Jason Franklin. I'm Senior Advisor with MVP, and I've seen a bunch of questions that have come up of like, well, what happens after November 3rd? And we are actively looking at that and thinking about it. You already heard about the Election Defense Fund and the Progressive Decade Fund are two vehicles we've set up to be able to invite all of you to help contribute to what happens after November 3rd. But when we think about like, what comes next? Huge push from now until November 3rd, but we know elections never stop and policy making never stops. And it's the fundamental reason why MVP exists is we're actually funding groups that exist beyond the election. We're building local power to both help elect new progressive leaders and to hold them accountable and push for policy change that's actually what changes people's lives. So that's an entire frame of all of MVC's work is long-term power building and shifting power and elections over multiple years and multiple decades. And immediately after November 3rd, we know there's 5 key priorities. So first and foremost is going to be funding work around election protection, ensuring a fair count. And it's really important to realize if you think there might be a contested election, you need to give resources to the groups now so that they can be prepared for the work that begins on November 4th. Funding them on November 4th is too late. And if we get lucky and they don't need that extra funds, can we go back to that slide? Sorry. And they don't need the extra funds, there's a lot of other things they will put that same money to use. So it's not wasted money. Second is going to be building pressure for progressive appointments. If Biden wins, when Biden wins, there's going to be a lot of pressure on who gets put into not just the cabinet positions, but the thousands of positions across the federal government and into state government leadership roles. And so building and supporting all of the movement groups who are going to be working to make sure we've got progressive leaders stepping into appointed positions is going to be critical. A third big piece is about preparing and delivering on movement demands in the first 100 days. We know that some of the most consequential legislation of every presidential administration happens in their first 100 days. And the work begins on November 4th, has already begun. There's a lot of work already underway on what are those possibilities for a Green New Deal, for Medicare and medical healthcare expansion, for civil liberties and rolling back the attacks that have been made on LGBT communities, on communities of color. All of those demands and building and supporting the movement work in those first 100 days is going to be critical. Then the two others that are looking long-term, because we need to look long-term, is around sustaining capacity of all of these groups we're supporting today to be ready for elections in 2021 and 2022 and beyond. There's going to be critical elections in Virginia. There are going to be critical governorships and mayorships up in 2021. There's going to be a huge set of elections, including many Senate races in 2022. We're already also looking at 2023 and 2024. And we know that many of the same key battleground states this year are going to continue to be key, which means we need to keep investing in all of them. And last, but certainly not least, we're going to be evaluating, did what we do worked? MVP has grown, the movement electoral work has grown. We need to be looking at what was successful and what didn't. What can we learn from the pivots in COVID to take towards the next steps? And what type of investments do we need to be doing in 2021 in the infrastructure to make sure that everyone's ready to be even stronger in 2022? So that's kind of our quick frame of what we've got as the kind of looking beyond the election, because we know that this work does not stop. And I'm not sure who I'm passing it to. I apologize for that. So.
It's me. Hi. I'm Naomi Sobel. Along with Andrea, I run our donor organizing and donor advising program here at MVP. And first, I just want to thank all of you for being on this call and for all the support you've already given to MVP. As Mirna said earlier, we have reached our initial $50 million goal, and we're actually announcing a new goal of $75 million that we want to raise and move to groups as soon as possible. We've already raised 60 million and moved 53 of it out to groups. And all of that is because of the work that each of you have done, giving of your own resources, activating your networks, organizing your communities. It's really going to take all of us. Even the 75 million doesn't cover all the work the groups could do if they were fully funded. They have all got plans and plans and plans that they could execute. So the sky's really the limit in terms of what they could do if we fully funded them. And it's been incredibly powerful to watch so many people get involved through MVP and with these local groups to really all row together in the same direction. At this point, let's see, it's August 20th, and we have 15,868 donors to MVP as of earlier this week, which is pretty incredible. I want to highlight some upcoming events that we'd love to see you at and that you can invite your networks to, both because they're really exciting things that are happening and because they're incredible examples of the creativity that our donor organizers on staff and our donor organizing volunteers have put into thinking through what's the right way to engage each of their communities. We have folks in LA who put together an art auction. We have folks in Western Mass who put together a virtual 5K. We have folks in Chicago who are doing a benefit concert. We have a crew led by David Mendel's, who's on this call, and Natalie Molina Nino, who I think is also on this call, working specifically with impact investors. David's also spearheading an alumni organizing strategy. And I want to highlight, we have parties coming up with Amherst, Harvard, UMass, Vassar, Dartmouth, and Yale alums. And if you are any of those people, please get in touch with us. We have an events calendar online. It's listed at the bottom of the screen, movement.vote/events. So you don't have to write all this down. It's available to you online. The other thing that we have is, and I want to say one more thing about these kinds of events. As I said, they're really specific to each community and what's the right thing for there, but they're also really effective. We've been bringing in between $100,000 and $250,000 a week through this kind of events and through house parties. Many of you have been to house parties. They're amazing. We've had already 300 house parties this electoral cycle, so that's since January 2019. And we have about 5 to 10 a week in the last 6 weeks. And so I want to just remind all of you, if you went to one, you had a good time. If you think this might be interesting for your folks, just because we're all doing this online doesn't mean we can't have a house party. Actually, the pace has picked up because it means people can invite the folks in their network they think would be most interested, regardless of where they live. So there's a form online for how to sign up to host a house party. It's bit.ly/MVP house parties. It's on the screen right now, and I will post it in the chat afterwards if nobody else gets to it. And I really encourage you to sign up and get involved because the pace is picking up. More and more people are looking to see what they can do. And I think we all know that everyone's reaching out. We're all reaching out to the folks we know and trust, trying to figure that out. And so the best messengers for getting MVP's word out there are you all, because the people who you know and trust are going to look to you specifically. The last event I wanted to highlight is that we are running this monthly series. Once a month, we run a very short MVP 101 program for folks who are maybe not interested yet in going into the kind of deep dive we did today and just want to get to know the organization for the first time. So the last one was this morning, and the next one is on September 11th, which is a Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern. We don't have a list of house parties available because they are usually closed to the people who are organizing them's networks, but the events page does list all the events that are open to the entire public. And with that, I just want to say there's so much you can do. There's so much you all are already doing. There's giving, there's hosting a party, organizing your networks, and testifying. And I just want to circle back to something Jason said about giving, right? Like almost everyone who's on this call has already given to or through MVP, and I couldn't be more grateful. And none of us want to wake up in November and think, oh man, if I had just written one more check. So please think about what else you can do this cycle and do it soon. We have a 25% match through the end of August. So anything you give C4 right now will get an extra 25% boost. But also start thinking about what's your giving plan going to be for this next year and the year after, right? This is a long-term project. If you only cared about the electoral outcome this year and you didn't care about any of the why or who, you might not be with MVP. On the other hand, you might, because we are doing probably the most effective electoral organizing out there. But you want it to work, right? You don't just want to win. You want to get all the things that the win means for a more just society. So think about what the long-term implications of that are. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Billy. Thank you again.
Thank you, Naomi. Yeah, for anyone who has not experienced MVP donor organizing with going to house parties and Zooms and local teams and being in relationship with our advisors, if you're new, like connect with us. We love new people. We love supporting people to get involved. Wow, I didn't even realize we'd crossed the 300 mark on events. That was all. I know all of you on this call have been working so hard. Some of you have almost taken MVP on as a second job. And we're just so grateful to everyone who's been organizing this huge collective effort to make this happen. So, we're gonna close out with just everyone take a second, take a deep breath, and think about something that you heard on this call that really spoke to you from one of the states, a story, a group, something that touched you, something that'll stick with you. And this is what we do. We think about these groups like all day, every day. And that's what motivates us to do this work is we know these groups, we love these groups, we know they need to hire an extra staff to pay for more text hustle time. So we are all in this together. Oh, someone searched the gallery view. This is so great. It's so great to see all of you. Ah, I see all these people who have been doing so much for MVP and for these local groups that we work with. And so, you know, just huge, huge gratitude to everyone. And I see Andrew Bundy with your hand over your heart. Yes, yes, yes. Let's all just kind of take a moment to look around you at our team, you know, all of our team, and connect with each other. We're a team, and we're going to do this together. We're going to transform our country together, and it's going to take all of us. It's going to take every conversation, every bit of passion, everything we've got. And if we do this right, not only are we going to kick these terrible people out of our government and get a fresh start, but we are going to build a transformative, progressive country like we know we have, like we know we need, like we know we deserve, like every child who's been separated from their family deserves, like every family who's had someone take it away from them deserves. We deserve this, and we can have this. We can make the 2020s a progressive decade. We can do this. We can do this together. So I just feel so grateful and connected to all of you, and feel like, you know, we're all just kind of isolated in our homes and our little places, but we are doing this together. And, you know, when I get tired, when I get grumpy, you know, I think about the local organizers who are in Florida, who are in Arizona, who are in Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania and North Carolina, who are going to save the world from my child, who they don't even know. And we're depending on you all in the battleground states. You know, my vote in Massachusetts isn't going to do it, you know, but yours is. And everyone who you talk to, Layla, in North Carolina between now and the election is going to make such a huge difference. So everyone who's on this call has been working so hard, has been giving so much, and we just are so grateful for you. And we just, if you're trying to figure out like, how could I do more, or maybe I could do a house party, or I could co-host it with someone, like get with, you know, most of you are already connected to someone on our team. Go have a conversation. If you're not sure what to do, have 3 more conversations until you guys figure out what to do. And we can figure out more to do together. And just like the organizers are organizing in the States, our job is to organize everyone we know, to be with them and to support them, and for them to feel the love coming from all over the country, because we are all depending on them collectively for all of our shared future. So thank you all, everyone on this extended team, and go team. And so let's everyone put your hands in. And can we get everyone off the mic, or on the mic? Can we get it so we can hear everyone? All right. So pretend we're all like, you know, in a circle playing sports. We're a team, right? There's another team we're going against. We're gonna have to win. We have to win, right?
Have to win.
Yes.
Win.
Hey, we're gonna say, on the count of 3, we're gonna say MVP. And then we're gonna say go team.
MVP.
Thank you. Love you all. Go team.
Love you guys.
Go team.
Let's do this thing.
Do it.
Great work.
Go strong.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for all your work.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. That was a terrific presentation.
Thanks, y'all. Let's talk and let's make this all happen. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks very much.